Hey, and welcome back to the channel. Are we seeing an inventory surge as we start off 2025? We just received the sales data from January. In this week's video, we are going to talk about housing inventory. We're going to talk about exactly what's happening with the market, and I'm also going to go over different types of stats that are easy to digest that help you determine whether we are in a buyer's market or a seller's market. Real quick, if this is your first time to the channel, my name is Hassan. I'm a real estate agent in the Vancouver area, and I make educational real estate content to help you on your real estate journey. When I'm not making videos like this, I'm helping people just like you buy and sell real estate across the Lower Mainland. So if that sounds interesting to you and you want to chat with me one-on-one about your real estate situation, you can book me for a free call in the Calendly link below or on screen, and subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a future weekly video. All right, hope you had a wonderful week. We're gonna hop right into it. We just received the data from the Greater Vancouver board as well as the Fraser Valley board in terms of what's happening with sales, what happened with sales in January. Long story short, on the Greater Vancouver side, sales activity wise, in terms of actual sales, we were up about 8 to 9% over last year's number from a sales transaction perspective. Now, it doesn't seem like a lot, and it's not. If we look at the prior year to that, last year was up about 38 or 39% versus the year prior to that. So sales activity wise, up in the 45, 46-ish percentile over the last 2 years. The big story though that is emerging as we start 2025 is this home inventory, the total active listings on the market. On the Fraser Valley side, if we compare it to our 10-year average, and if you've followed my channel for a bit, you know I'm a big fan of the 10-year average because it wipes out a lot of anomalies that have happened in the short term. Over 50, 55% above that 10-year average on the Fraser Valley side when it comes to total active listings. On the Greater Vancouver side, again, that 10-year average number, we're up about 33%. So it's significant in terms of total listings. If we look at where we are at today in Greater Vancouver for total active inventory, we haven't been at this level for a January in 10 years. I went back to January 2015 is when we had this amount of inventory, over 11,000 units of total active listings. Now, the thing is with an inventory number, it doesn't really tell you a lot. Like I can sit here and say, okay, there are these many homes available for you to sell, but if you don't know how many are actually selling compared to those total listings, that number is kind of, it's just a number. And so what we look at as real estate agents, the metric that kind of helps us determine, are we sitting in a buyer's market? Are we sitting in a seller's market? Are we in a balanced market? Is what we call a sales to active ratio. And a sales to active ratio is exactly what it sounds like. It's basically a number, a percentage, that'll tell you out of 100 homes how many are actually selling. And if that percentage falls within a certain range, it's going to determine whether we are in a buyer's market, whether we are in a balanced market, or whether we are in a seller's market. And basically the way that we track this is anything between 12 and 20%, from 12 and 20%, that is a balanced market territory. Below that, so for example, if the sales to active ratio was 10%, that would mean 10 out of every 100 homes are selling. So you can get an indication that that leans towards buyers. That's a buyer's market. And if we're at 21% plus, that is what we call a seller's market. Now, from an overall perspective, when we look at sales to active ratios, a lot of it is going to be very dependent on location and always dependent on property type. So over the last month in January, we'll talk Greater Vancouver side, detached homes, sales active ratios about 9% overall for all communities combined. So well into a buyer's market. We saw condos hovering between 16 to 18%. Same thing for townhomes. So those were both in balanced markets. So of the three property types that we tend to track, again, condos, townhomes, detached homes, everything in either a balanced market or a buyer's market. And that's quite different than what we typically see. Even in a slower market here, we usually will see condos kind of hovering around the the 20% on either side of that 20%. Very often they'll be sitting in a low seller's market, but it's uncommon to see it down around that 16% range. So, this is what tells us that this added inventory that's, been put onto the market, or all of these new listings, it's not getting absorbed as it has in the past. Now, one of the metrics that tends to get reported a lot, and it can have more fluctuations in numbers, are new listings. So you'll often see reported, sometimes in headlines, but you'll see it reported by the boards. It'll say new listings were up 50%, or we had this many new listings, and it'll be quite a large number. You got to be very careful with new listing amounts, or the numbers of, and how much we were up last year versus this year. The thing about a new listing is it does not account for the amount of times that one property might be taken off the market and relisted almost immediately. That would essentially be tracked as a new listing. Now, in a slower market, this happens a lot more frequently than you might think. You may have a property that you have listed, it's been on the market for a few months. You want to adjust the price now, maybe tweak the price a little bit. Rather than just change the price, sometimes what agents are doing is they'll take it off the market, put it back on the market. So that'll show as a new listing. And this happens very frequently. So for myself personally, I don't look at that new listing number at all, because it doesn't really guard against these nuances. It doesn't tell me a lot. So the better thing to look at is total overall inventory. The same can be said about a data point that we look at, which is days on market. So you may be viewing on whichever search site it might be, on Realtor.ca, whatever it is, you might be looking, and you look at a listing and you see that it's been on the market for 3 days. So you're thinking this is a fresh listing and I got to get out there quick. There may be some activity on that very quickly because it's fresh and new, and buyers like fresh and new. What you may not realize is that property has been relisted 2 or 3 times in succession, and it's only been on the market this time around for the 3 days. So in fact, this has been a listing that's been on the market much longer, but it appears that it's been shorter. So days on market, again, this is something that I'm not even really looking at anymore, because it doesn't tell me anything. You can look up, through our access, through Realtor Access, you can look up cumulative days on market, and that'll show you, how many days amongst the different listing periods it's been on market. But days on market, it's not a great indicator. And the way that you can kind of tell is sometimes we will be in a buyer's market. So for instance, I'm looking at a certain product type. It has a sales active ratio of, let's say, 7%, 7 out of every 100. So very low amount of sales. That's definitely buyer's market. But I'll see days on market will be, 10 days. And those two numbers together, they don't actually jive. If you're going to have less sales, most likely you should be seeing days on market grow, because there's not as many sales happening compared to how much total inventory is there sitting on the market. So sometimes these two numbers, they will conflict with each other. And so I can quickly take a look at it and say, okay, something is not jiving here. Something was freshly relisted. So again, for your purposes, if you're someone like me and you like diving into the stats, pay attention to total inventory. Total inventory is the better number. Pay less attention to days on market. If you want to get some, deeper data, talk to a real estate agent that you trust to kind of get that deeper data. For myself personally, what jumped out to me from January is that detached home segment with the sales active ratio at 9%. So much slower than we've typically seen. Detached homes have very often been in sellers markets. In fact, last month, North Vancouver, 24% sales to active ratio for detached homes. North Van tends to be one of the strongest markets for detached homes. But what surprised me about last month's number, did not expect this, especially considering how land values have increased, is all of the cities that had detached homes sales active ratios strongly in the buyer's market territory. I'm going to look down at my stats here because I don't want to mess up the numbers, but Vancouver East, for instance, 7%, 7 out of every 100 homes sold detached wise. Vancouver West Side, we saw, let's see here, 6%. Richmond, what did we see in Richmond here? Sorry, North Vancouver I mentioned. West Vancouver, 5%. So I subscribe to a third-party service which gives me some deep, detailed stats on specific neighborhoods. It's not what's on the MLS. I'm actually not allowed to throw them up on screen here. I used to do videos, short videos in the past where I would go over all of the different neighborhoods, all of the different price bands because I have access to these stats. In fact, the provider of the stats reached out to me and said, we're seeing your videos all over the place. You can't publicize them like that. You are allowed to email them out to people, but you can't pop them up. But what it does is it gives me every city across the Lower Mainland. It gives me every neighborhood. It gives me every price band for the month, and it shows me what has sold versus what is on market. It shows me price trend. There's a lot of data for every city. If this is something that you're interested in, if you want access to this data, send me a note. Probably easiest if you email me or send me a text, but I can get this over to you. Again, comes out monthly, but these are invaluable because sometimes I'll have people come to me and they'll say, Hassan, I wanna buy a condo. I'm pretty open on where I want to be. It's got to be, generally Coquitlam, Vancouver, Burnaby, something along those lines. They'll say, I need to be along the SkyTrain line, but I want to get a really good deal. Where can I get that good deal? And for me personally, at this point, based on my day-to-day working in the market every day, I can tell that client or that caller, okay, these are the areas we should look. But if I didn't have that knowledge from the day-to-day, these stats would tell me everything I need to know. So I can dive into this. I can say, okay, this is where all the inventory is sitting. Not a lot of sales happening. Sales active ratio in this community is only 6%. It's a strong buyer's market. There's great growth potential. This is the area we should look at. So these stats that I have here, they really break it down and they allow me to kind of tailor exactly the different types of areas to go for. But, it's very important. The reason I start talking about these stats is, and you can get from the sense of this video, is there's so many different stats that will get thrown out at you. The ones that'll make the headlines, the news headlines, are probably the ones that are most irrelevant to you, right? So they're going to pull out the one that has the largest change. So that growth in inventory, we're 50% plus over that 10-year average of inventory. That sounds like a very large number, but like I mentioned off the top, if you don't know how many are selling out of those active listings, it's not telling you much. And that's why I felt it was important to talk about, sales to active ratio, because that's truly the number that really tells you a lot. If we have 12,000 listings on the market, the most we've seen in 20 years, and, the sales to active ratio is 30%, well, that's a market that's ripping and roaring. That inventory is going to get eaten up. It is going to get consumed. But if the headline only talks about the inventory, you can sit there and read it and say, oh man, there's just too much inventory out there. It's a buyer's market. It makes no sense to buy right now. Way too much inventory. But if that sales number isn't as strong, it's not going to make a headline. It's not going to mean much. Now, when you work with the right agent that has been doing this for some time, they know which stats are important and which ones aren't. Like I mentioned, the days on market and the new listings, we know which ones to just not look at. They're irrelevant and they don't actually factor into what's actually happening with the market. If I can, give you some anecdotal stuff as we end off this video of what's going on in the market, I would say a lot of uncertainty. I would say there's a lot of people that are viewing properties. Viewings are way up. There's a lot of people that are coming open houses, booking showings, doing second, third showings, a lot of this sort of activity. But, I probably don't need to tell you, over the last 2 weeks, there's been a lot of uncertainty and turmoil, not in the real estate market, but in terms of Canada economically and our relationship with the US, our biggest trading partner, and how's that going to affect our daily lives? And are we going to get hit with tariffs? And if we are, what does that mean for me and my employment? what's happening with rates in the meantime as well. So there's just been so much uncertainty, and I think people they're patient, but they're not patient in years past where people wouldn't even view homes. They're not saying, okay, I'm not going to make any real estate moves in the first half of this year. They're dipping their toe in, and they're trying to get some sense of stability in terms of what's kind of happening around us. So again, I said it in a previous video, I do expect this spring is going to get more active. I'm having more buyer consultations now, and buyer consultations for me very much the absolute first step, right? So people will sometimes reach out to me and they don't want to do anything. They don't want to purchase for another 6 months, but they want to get ahead of it, and they'll talk to me. We'll book a call, and we'll lay out, like a 6-month plan in terms of getting them to the point where we're ready to actually see properties. And I'm getting a lot more of that now. People reaching out, booking these consultations, and just getting themselves prepared, taking their time. Again, I think this is going to be a good market for people who are first-time buyers just getting into the market. People that are buying condos, especially that are open to areas. There's a lot of different areas you could look at where there are some good deals to be had. But I'm starting to see that momentum. I think we're going to have a bit busier of a spring. But the message in this video, again, is try not to pay attention to headlines. Find a real estate agent you can trust. If you don't have one that you can trust, you don't have one now, you can always reach out to me. But it's very important to understand the different types of data and how it actually affects you. Real estate, I've said it before, it's not just an investment, of course. It's a roof over your head. It has double utility in that sense, but you do have to dive into the numbers and to really get an understanding of how the market is performing in specific neighborhoods for specific product types. The story surrounding townhomes and duplexes very different than condos, and as you could tell from this video, very different than detached homes as well. So there you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week's video and learned something. If you did, hit the like button, because what that does is it takes this video and it sends it out to more people so they can also learn from it. And if you enjoy weekly real estate content, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss next week's video. And lastly, if you're in the Vancouver area or the Fraser Valley, you want to chat with me one-on-one, you can book me for a free call in the Calendly link, or you can just send me a text, give me a call, shoot me an email. All my info's in the description box below. But I want to thank you so much for watching this week's video, and I look forward to seeing you next week.